Steven has never been poor, so he doesn't have these sentimental stories about how he worked as a barman and how he unloaded wagons at night. Also, there are no stories about how he worked part-time at nuclear power station or spent the night on the bridge. Before getting into the movies, Steven was rich. He had his own Aikido club, where various producers and heads of Hollywood studios trained. So, thanks to good friends, or simply speaking by nepotism, he got into a big movie. The connections really were not at the very top, so Steven had to sweat a lot. At first, actor had to tore his ass and all other body parts for his first movies. It has borne fruits. How it's called? Patience and labor, and a few friends, of course. Or a lot. As a result, Steven flew into Hollywood Olympus very quickly. It took him only 4 years and 5 movies to get into the list of the highest paid actors. This is Critic, let's go! The first film work for Seagal was the action movie Above the Law. The name of his hero from this picture gave the name for the unofficial franchise Nika. To get this role, Seagal demonstrated the level of his combat training to the managers of the Warner studio. The Warner bosses were horrified watching Seagal crushing 30 students from his Aikido club. The civilians were so impressed by Seagal's dominance over several sparring partners at the same time that they immediately agreed to sign him for the main role. Later, Steven admitted that it took him several days to stage this performance. After the success of the movie Above the Law in cinemas, there was a real Aikido boom in America. Realizing that he would no longer be able to work as actor and school director simultaneously, Steven Seagal sold off all his assets. The actor spent a long time carefully choosing the script of his second film, because he wanted something that hasn't happened yet. That is how the film was born, where Seagal was killed, but not completely, and then he goes into coma for several years to gather his strength. The success was phenomenal. Steven woke up famous. With a 10 million budget only in the USA, the rental brought 50 million. If you calculate inflation, then in our time it would be a film with a budget of 20 million and fees under 100. Somewhere in the side Keanu Reeves is crying quietly with his John Wick. Then, following 2 more box office successful work of the actor, the action film Marked for Death and Out for Justice. By the way, Marked for Death noted as the most violent action movie in Seagal's career. Rating Organization of America marked it as the most violent film of 1990, and they showed us only a stripped-down version. In order to get the needed rating, the creators cut out a lot of broken arms, legs and necks from the picture. In general, each new film of the actor collected in cinemas more money than the previous movie. In this regard, only the rise of a well-known Belgian boy can be compared with Seagal. Probably the easiness with which Steven achieved worldwide famous then would play a cruel joke on him. The beginning of the end for the actor was his highest grossing film, Under Siege. When picture gathered 160 million in cinemas, Steven Seagal got a star disease, which often leads to sad consequences. It is especially dangerous if actors have a very difficult character. Seagal had just such a one. After hitting the big screen of the movie Under Siege, a big fan of effectively breaking bad guys' legs and arms suddenly decided to become a great director. Well, what's wrong with that? A talented person should be talented in everything. In his aspiration, Steven was supported by 2 Hollywood studios. 20th Century Fox offered Seagal to make a movie Man of Honor. The film was supposed to be typical Seagal movie. The Italian mafia accidentally found itself on the path of the raging hero, who organized for them a bloody hell. The company offered Steven Seagal full creative control, the director's chair, the producer's chair, and the main role. The only Fox conditions were a script and a budget. The first was given out by a company, and the second was not supposed to exceed the $30 million. Another studio that agreed to Seagal's directorial debut was Warner Bros. The offer was similar, with one exception: Steven could take any script he liked. The cherry on the cake here was the possibility of blackmail from Seagal. After the success of Under Siege, Warner Studio really wanted to see Seagal in the film Under Siege 2, and knowing this, Steven increased his appetite and forced the studio to increase the budget for his debut. When the estimated budget of Steven Seagal's new film flew past the 40 million mark, the talented actor refused Fox's offer. He agreed to star in the film Under Siege 2 and choose the script for his debut as a director. The choice fell on the film The Invisible Warrior, which later turned into the picture One Deadly Ground. The shooting of this movie was a real disaster. Steven constantly made change to the script, fought with stuntmen, quarreled with his friends, who instantly passed into the category of ex-friends. The budget of Deadly Ground during the filming and refilming was grown to $50 million. The amount is quite impressive for the mid-90s. After unsuccessful test views, the studio demanded to cut 30 minutes of the movie because of the incredible tightness. Part of the test group simply fell asleep during the session. Steven wanted to make the Lord of the Rings ending, when the main plot is completed and the audience watch for another 30 minutes how the characters rejoice, say goodbye, drink and everything like this. Seagal also spent 20 minutes showing nature, chipmunking running through the forest, deer, whales jumping out of the water and other. So for 20 minutes nature thanked Steven Seagal for saving it. The flop was great. With a production budget of 50 million, the picture earned only 39. Steven Seagal received the Golden Raspberry as the first director, and Warner Studio decided to withdraw the movie from international distribution in order not to lose even more money. Perhaps Seagal could be saved by the next two big-budget films for which he was already signed. But the sequel Under Siege that followed One Deadly Ground didn't meet expectations. Also, executive decision suddenly ceased to be Steven Seagal's films. If Seagal took seriously The Bell Sounded Over on Deadly Ground, then maybe Under Siege 2 would have become a slightly different movie. But the actor who caught the star thought that failure of the film was an accident, and he didn't take the sequel of his main hit very seriously. In this film, Steven Seagal began to use a tightening belt for his belly for the first time. The actor promised to the producers that gradually he would go back into the shape, but this, as we know now, didn't happen. Moreover, Seagal also made his contribution into the final editing of the film, completely ignoring the director's opinion. Someone tells that they even fight. The final point on Steven Seagal's status as a superstar was put by the scandal that broke out in Hollywood in the 1995. Steven was accused in domestic violence, and then he was bombarded with the accusations of sexual harassment. Kurt Russell, who was also signed to the film Executive Decision, refused to work with Seagal after such news. Perhaps if there hadn't been two failures in a row behind Steven Seagal's backs, the studio would have turned a blind eye to the scandal and Kurt Russell's. Who knows, maybe Russell himself would have been rolled out of the film, but stars aligned differently. The Steven Seagal's hero was quickly killed, and the role of John Leguizamo in the film Executive Decisions was greatly expanded. The snowball has severely undermined the actor's career. He did not appear in big-budget films anymore. Other films with his participation failed one after another, and 5 years after the release of On Deadly Ground, Steven moved to small screens, from which he got out only once in the Robert Rodriguez film Machete. Like Van Damme, Steven's career was ruined by an inflected sense of self-importance. Realizing where he was falling, Steven stopped taking care of himself, and by the end of the 90s, he no longer fit on the screen. I know that Steven is not considered as actor, and it's normal to ridicule his acting data, but it was much more pleasant to look at him on screen than at many current actors who are considered to be great talents. Charisma is still very important in movies, and Steven had it. Thank you for attention, subscribe and stay on the line.